a little bit origin story of ARTogether was, well, I'm not an artist. I always love art and I benefited from it immensely, but I've never considered myself an artist. I cannot draw for to save my life. um, However, I learned later that there are many different forms of expression, and drawing is just one of them. What had happened is Donald Trump got elected in 2026, and it was a shock in many ways. For me, more than anything, was like, do I know this country enough? Is it something that the land of opportunity that I came and I want to build my life here? Is this place is really welcoming people like me? Everybody's looking for ways to do something basically. And for me, being from the immigrants, refugee communities, I knew that if I want to do some work with my local communities, that is the community I want to work with. But why art came into picture from somebody with no experience and background in art? Back in the days in my previous life, I was a writer. I was writing in Farsi and I was a blogger and I had an active writing work. And I feel at some point I lost my connection with reading in Farsi and poetry and literature. And I felt like in English, I never found that language. I always had that feeling that a wing or both of my wings has been cut. I never felt confident enough in my English writing to take that on. It's always there was something missing. Also, firsthand experiencing the isolation of the refugee communities, the immigrants communities are coming up, experience of my parents who weren't speaking English when we first arrived, and their desire, they wanted to connect with folks, but that something was missing. And always that feeling of shame, of not being able to communicate. And for me, it was always what can make those spaces more equal? Like people from different backgrounds can be around the table, do something together, and experience something together without have that feeling of shame or isolation or like feeling that it's just like totally different world. And I think that's how art came into picture. It's an activity that everybody, no matter of what their background, their ethnicity, their language skills, is something that everybody could participate in. The original idea of ARTogether was not really a nonprofit or anything. I wasn't even thinking that way. I had my full-time job. It was more like a project that came out of my rage of election of Trump 1.0. And before that, all of my work was international. I wasn't really that much connected with my local community here. But it started with founding some refugee and immigrants forum, and I start cold calling and cold emailing to see who might be interested in idea of bringing art to the work that they are doing. It took a couple of months to get the first email back, and I started working with an artist friend of mine, and we started working with an agency in Oakland, Center for Empowering Refugees and Immigrants, who were back then was working mostly with genocide survivors of Southeast Asia, and we start some regular art program with them. And in a matter of like 4 months, we were getting requests right and left from different groups who were hearing from that. And the first class, I think, happened in June of 2017. And by October, we had more than 30 different programs. And that was then that I was like, oh, maybe this is something missing. Surprisingly enough, nothing has changed that much from the time that we came to the country. There were, not anymore, unfortunately, the resettlement agencies who were supporting refugees when they first come in for more logistical stuff, employment, housing, sign up for schools. But there weren't as much programs for the community building connection or simply bringing joy to the life of these people that many of them waited years and years outside of the borders, not only southern borders, but from different countries to be able to come to the US. So I felt the need there that there's something is missing in this ecosystem of supporting refugees and immigrants that is more tailored towards cultural activities and art activities. And I think by end of 2017, I was very sure that this is going to be a nonprofit of its own, and I'm going to do that work.
That's amazing. Now you have a lot of programs, you have a large community, folks coming. Tell me a little about the experience of when somebody comes to an Art Together meet-in or gathering for the first time. Describe what that's like, both for that participant, kind of their threshold experience, but also what do you see in the room?
So, in terms of our programs, we have some programs that are specifically tailored for some specific group of folks. We have some programs for the newcomers, and we have some programs for students. Those are the programs that we do outreach, and people kind of expect what to come into. But then we have programs like Gather In, which is an really open space for everybody who wants to make this connection and wants to make art. They could be local, they could be diasporic, they could be newly arrived immigrants or those who've been here for many years. When they arrive in the room, they would see basically a few tables that are set up with art supplies. They would see people who are welcoming there. They would see a table of food and drink that they can help themselves. But I think more than anything, they would be welcomed by one of our staffs who are just talking to them and say, "Hey, welcome. Is it your first time?" Explain them what is happening in the room. And also, we are asking them about the language need, if they feel comfortable speaking English or if they need English support with the language. Between our staff and board members and volunteers, we speak many, many different language. But even if the language is not present in that room, we definitely, thanks to technology nowadays, we have a lot more ways to connect, and language wise as well. But what we are taking most pride of is that we don't need to speak the same language to make art. Let me actually answer this question with one vivid memory that I have from one of these programs that we had. A newly arrived Afghan woman came to one of our programs, and they didn't speak English, but they start making collage. We were doing some collage work, and they were so happy when they found a pattern on a magazine that represent embroidery from a familiar culture for them. And then they cut that and they start basically put that piece of image next to other one, and that is start a conversation with someone else on that table, start talking about the pattern of the embroidery, and the other person basically took their phone out and tried to show them the embroidery that they were doing, a little bit different from these patterns. But that start a conversation through Google translators between these two folks about the embroidery. And you know what happened after that? The local person learned that this newly arrived person is looking for an English teacher. And they were like, my mother in law is looking for someone to support in this way. And the connection happened. And I know after 2 years, they're still working together. That person may come to Art Together twice only after that, but they build a connection there through a picture of embroidery that happened over the table that support that newly arrived refugee person even after 2 years. These are the stories that happens every day. One of the other vivid memories that I have from Art Together, the image that is in just I think forever is going to stay in my head, is that I saw a few people sitting around the piano. Few kids were sitting on the floor actually and painting, and some folks were looking at the images and pictures of the artworks on the wall. That happens so organically, but that basically summarized everything that I always dreamed of that happened in Art Together. That people are get together, do some things around the art, but these are the people that otherwise won't know each other, won't be in the same space. And what brought all of them there is their passion for the arts. And none of them were artists, as a matter of fact. It's just like people who believed in this expression and brought them together.
So you've talked about the art being the social glue. And these people, as you say, aren't necessarily artists, but there seems like the art plays a very, very important role of creating together in space in terms of accelerating engagement, belonging, community that just being in space together with food and conversation, it adds something to it. Can you talk a little about, like, what is that role that the art itself and the art as a verb plays in this?
Let me answer this question by bringing two examples. A couple years ago, we did a large mural in San Antonio Park in San Antonio district east of Oakland. For that project, we had a lead muralist artist, Cici Carpio, but the project was formed and shaped by the input from the neighbors. Over the course of 2 months, we did outreach with all the schools, churches, community spaces, there to the door to door knocking, asked all the neighbors to come together and tell us what do they want to see in their neighborhood park. So we had two community workshops. The first day was about what do you want to see? Let's walk around. Let's collect the symbols of your neighborhood that you want to see. Through 2 days workshops, first it was ideas, suggestions. Our artists put them together, and then we had the feedback sessions. And the feedback session actually happened with the neighbors, non-artists, children from the age of 11 all the way to an elderly woman of 60 years old, we all together. And as our artists were talking about the images, the specification of them, why it matters, the story of them, how they connect to the history of San Antonio, everybody had their input about like how do they want to see, what color they want to see. Even if they were not the actual artists who put that final work together, they were all part of creating that idea. And I cannot emphasize enough of how important it is, especially for the immigrants community, to see their voices and their images in a public spaces in their new hometown. When they see somebody, first of all, listening to them in a project that is showing in a larger scale, in the faces of the city, it's just a sense of pride and ownership that comes with it for somebody who didn't grow up on that neighborhood, but to chose to be on that place. And everybody came on those mural painting days, support with helping. And after, I think the mural has been there up for more than 3 years. We didn't have one single graffitis goes on that mural. It stays unattacked because I feel like the neighborhood who were part of the design, who were part of the arts, who are seeing themselves on the images of that mural, they are taking the stewardships and they are the guardians of that piece of art. And this is something that we see over and over when people are part of the creation of an art piece. It's just the feeling of the ownership, especially in a public art project. It just helps a lot with those feeling of belonging and feeling of the ownership of the space that they are part of.
Tell me, specifically working with immigrant and refugee communities, what's unique about doing this work with refugee and immigrant communities in a place like Oakland?
It's hard for me to answer this question without bringing my personal experience into this. Like many immigrants, I always had this struggle of how to fit in. Belonging is even not coming to mind because the first few years, especially the first 10 years or so, it's all about how to fit in, how to correct your accent, how to get the American education, how to find a job, how to be a good citizen. All of those things are about to fit in. My desire was like, how can we create a space that I don't need to constantly feel like I need to fit in, but basically have this feeling of the belonging. And after being here for like, I don't know, more than 20 years now, I know that's a feeling that comes and goes. There are days that I feel, oh, I do belong. And there are days that I feel like, what the hell I'm doing here? uh, but then when I do see a familiar image in a public space, When I go to a festival and I hear music from my country or a country of origin of for any of these immigrants communities, when you see the dance, when you see the culture, and when you see the food is valued, and it's not just as a token, but actually something that could be part of the cultural fabric of the city, I think that is the time that you feel the belonging. Feeling belonging is not just coming from me internally, how I feel, but it also needs to come from outside. It also needs to come from people around who cares about what is happening. When you are as an immigrant, for example, when I'm walking in the street and I suddenly see something written in Farsi, it takes me, because belonging is just not the people, it is the space, it is the smell, it is the visual images that you see around you. And I think that for us American, here's my American part is talking right now. How can we say, oh, it's a sanctuary city, everybody is welcome, Bay Area is progressive, but are we really creating a space of belonging for the folks that we want to welcome them? I think that's the constant question and quest for all of us. I feel like more than anything, we want to tell people who are coming to our door is that your story matters, your background matters. When you lack the knowledge of a common language here, it doesn't mean that you lack knowledge. These people were highly educated. They were doctors, physicians, teachers, engineers, lawyers, all sort of things in their back home, their countries. And then they came here, and because of the systems, they start as an Uber driver, they start as a security, all of those things to build a life here again because they want to have a better life here. Are we providing them to them? Are we creating a space for them to feel that way? I think that's all up to all of us.
Do you find there's a balance between cultural familiarity and cross community mixing in the work that you do with Art Together? Do you see there being a balance of bringing the worlds together and kind of understanding how to do that when you're dealing with not only people in two worlds, but communities from multiple worlds? How do you approach that kind of bringing together these multiple cultures, honoring where people come from, and supporting kind of the cross cultural education or sharing?
It's hard to verbalize that because what I'm experiencing and what I'm seeing from the people at Art Together is that all of us are carrying multiple realities and multiple world, and this is the nuances of working with the immigrants communities, that we have to be able to carry different realities. Having this conflict, this hyphenated identity of an Iranian American, and sometimes my American is more strong, sometimes my Iranian more strong, and also it's just like it's an impossible place. Two sides of my hyphenated identities, they are enemies with each other. But how we are holding all of these realities together. I'm one of those who has only two hyphenated. We have people who are Chinese Singaporean Americans. We have people who are queer. We have people who are, trans. And it's just adding layers and layers and layers to these identities that people are trying to hold. For me, I feel one of the biggest learning at Art Together was like, first of all, there is not one true. People are holding many different identities and realities, and it is so hard for us here as an American, progressive Americans, to understand the nuances of different backgrounds and different ethnic groups when they are coming here, and how much our pros and cons and all of those things are coming from us wearing our American social warriors hat. How much of that is true in the realities of others people's life? It's just a constant learning and unlearning and understanding that we just need to accept that it's a very large words, and people we have in America, in a very, it's just such a beautiful place that we have this opportunity to have this many people from different cultures in one place, but also scary in terms of we can't really have one standards or one social warriors hat for all of those.
Tell me, how do you know when this works? And I guess there's sort of a two-part question, because when I look at it, I think I'm saying part of how this works is people building community, people feeling an enhanced sense of belonging and community and maybe grounding and identity. But, that's what I'm projecting as success. But how do you know when it's working, and what does that look like for you?
The problem with racism internally and internationally and between different ethnic groups and immigrants are also not a hegemonic group. You are all people are coming from different backgrounds, and even people from one country who are immigrants here. There are, there are differences and there are ethnic tensions and all of those things that we need to see and we need to accept. I do think at the end of the day, it goes back to our shared humanities. And I think that is, again, it's the role of art, the things that only art, I think, or art and storytelling can solve. We don't believe in others people as equal unless we see their stories and we hear their stories and we understand that how their stories also connected, and at the core we are all human who wants to be loved, who wants to be heard, and who cares about peoples around us. To me, that is the core of this shared humanities, basically. So let me tell you this story. During the campfire in Northern California a couple years ago, we had a weekly program. It was a craft class for we work in Concord with mostly South and Central American women. There was one of those days that the smoke was everywhere. It was hard to breathe and all of that. And I happened to be in that class with the teacher that day. And our teacher asked, how do you guys are coping with the weather? Do you want to keep the class? How your kids are doing and all of that? And somehow conversation went to fire and losing home. And one thing that I vividly remember is one of those women told us that how seeing the images and seeing the people on TV, although she doesn't understand what they're saying, she feels them because she knows what it means to lose a home. And that day, the woman in that group, they were making like jewelry, and they decided to make a package of that jewelries that they made that day and send it to the community center in Lake area, basically. I think at the end of the day, this is something that makes us close. And this is the story of the immigrants, that our shared joy, our shared suffering, and our shared, these memories is what's connect us together.
That's a very powerful and beautiful story. Kind of wanted to kind of dig into a little bit of your experience in art, both as a tool individually for kind of emotional health and mental health. Can you talk to me about, like, especially for communities who maybe are coming from trauma, or coming from, all of the layered realities of being in a new place and or being displaced, like just the individual impact and benefit of art making and creating for the people who participate.
We do have an ongoing youth program that cohorts of youth throughout 16 to 20 sessions and few over the course of few months. These are mostly newcomers youth. They learn how to write on a story, their stories mostly, and in any language they want to, and make shadow puppetry characters, and then record that and make an animation out of that. I highly, highly recommend to watch those videos that these 16 years old, 17 years old are making. 1 minute video they're making about their stories. One of them came from a 16 years old boy, and the title of his 1 minute video was "It is okay to feel sad." And in that video, he was talking about his experience crossing the border by himself, and some adults who were not his immediate families, and fear of unknown, and on top of many other things, and come here and found this class, for example, and coming to a class with 14 other students, same situation as him, and hearing their stories and understanding not only that he is not alone, but he's feeling that where he is not also alone in those feeling of fear, and also it is okay to talk about feeling. That coming from a 16 years old boy meant everything. I wish like more adults be able to be that raw and upfronting with those kind of emotions and uncertainty. I think being in a group of students that everybody is thinking the same way, creating a space that they feel comfortable enough with the facilitators and teachers to be able to say that, I think that is the beginning of a healing process. It's not all of it. It's not gonna take the place of therapy, but also even being able to say that, I think matters a lot. This is like individual creating an artwork for themselves in a group setting, and then we have programs for group work. Especially, I want to bring back this group of, we have these programs for newly arrived Afghan women. And the name of the program is It's My Turn. These are the women who sacrifices their whole life for their husbands and children and families. And for many of them, they were not the ones who were working with the US troops. Their husbands were the ones who were working with the US troops. They brought here basically because they wanted to be with their husbands. And after the fall of Kabul in 21, many of them found themselves completely alone in a matter of week, separated from their families and all of the support group that they had. In these programs, they learn about how to be able to talk about their needs, what it means to understand that they matters, and what it means to basically be able to have a time of their own. And let me tell you this as well, that just having an art class and saying, oh, please come. These are the people who are not coming to those art classes just because they are free. Especially people who are not an artist or doesn't have a background in art. They are not just going to sign up for an art class. For us to be able to encourage this woman and this people or this youth to come to this class, not only the classes are free, but we provide transportation, we provide childcare, we provide all the supplies, and we provide the stipends for them to understand that why coming to these spaces matters. And what happens after a few sessions, then they understand the value of that and then they continue coming. But coming back to the idea of the accessibility of art, it matters a lot that not just making those spaces free, but also make it possible for those folks to be able to participate. For those women who finally wants to find the time of their own, they can't do that if there isn't a childcare. They can't do that if there isn't a transportation. So I want to bring those into the equation when we are thinking about and creating these spaces or third spaces. Accessibility matters a lot too.
If I was wanting to, or if somebody was wanting to start something similar in their community, whether it's for immigrant and refugee communities, or for somebody else, a different community trying to build community in a place using art making, would you have any kind of recommendations or flags to watch out for, or where would you start?
I would start to see what is already existed and why it doesn't work. Or does it work? If such a thing existed, we don't need to invent everything from the scratch, right? If something existed, can you build upon that? If there is a community center who is offering art programs, can you use that space, for example? What makes people have a double thoughts on coming to your program or class? What prevents them from coming out? How can you take off those barriers, for example? As I said, it's not just say, oh, there's an art class, come and hang out with us. How to actually make it accessible for people to come. Um, but if somebody wants to do that, my first recommendation is there such a thing existed in your community that you can build upon on that, or you absolutely need to start from scratch? And what is the end goal of this one? Are you want to produce something? You just want to bring people together, and how you are creating in a space those people who don't have any artistic talents also feels welcome and heard.
What is something people don't understand about this, or the question that like you would like people to understand more about this work?
One thing we try to do at Art Together is bringing art back from its ivory tower of exclusivity. not only for everyday folks, but also for artists. So at Art Together, we work with everyday people, for the newly arrived refugees and immigrants and people who are not artists. But also we are working with artists who were professional practice artists basically back home, and they came here. And as you know, art community can be very exclusive. It's not easy to get into the art world. And historically, fine art became something that people with means could also mostly practice and put resources into that. For us, art is a tool of creation, but also a tool of expression. So we are working with fine artists who are creating art pieces that we call fine arts, but also it is more about the process of being in the room together, playing with colors, playing with different mediums of expression, basically. That process is with value a lot. And also for us to take that exclusivity out of the art world and bring it to this. What makes in an art piece a fine art and make the other one a craft work, for example? What makes something to go on the museum, the other one's going to, I don't know, your kitchen table, for example, or your fridge art. Who is the one who's making this distinguished, basically? So those are all the questions that comes, and we are dealing with that on everyday work of art together. So creation, yes, but connection, and definitely expression. And if I want to, like, rate this tree at Art Together, I would say that for us is connection, expression, and later comes creation. Our goal is really how to use art and these spaces for connecting people, especially now that everything is so divided.
Thank you so much. It's such beautiful work you're doing. I'm excited to come over and witness it myself if I can. I think Abra and I were talking about coming over, but I really appreciate you telling me. Is there anything else you want to add to the conversation?
Ah, I think because my mind these days are very much engaged with the idea and concept of belonging and what it means for an immigrant to feel belonging. I don't think it's something that I can achieve or society can achieve. I think it's something that we have to practice together. I think this is something that no matter how much I, as a general immigrant, wants to feel belonged or belong, it's not coming without the mutual practice from the people around me. Why spaces like that bringing peoples closer together is making art. It's a vulnerable moment. We are risking things when we are putting ourselves, when we are expressing ourselves, and being vulnerable and being raw in front of each other. That bring a closeness that I feel is unique to the art spaces. So those are the stuff that we are trying to practice at Art Together and every day. Some days we fail, some days we achieve our goal, but again, it's really everyday practice.
I love it. Thank you so much.